Miss Stacy Nation, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Get Foxy show today. I'm so glad you are here.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so glad I get to be here. It's an honor and privilege, as always, to share space with you. So thank you for having me.
You betcha. Well, in full transparency for my listeners, Stacy and I have actually been friends since, what was that? Maybe junior year of high school. So 1994, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. It's been, oh my gosh, nearly 25 years.
My goodness. Oh, we're not that old, though.
No, not at all. We're only 25. So
Well, my dear friend Stacy is a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in working with people who have experienced trauma. And how did you go from being small town kid in Rollins, Wyoming to licensed clinical social worker?
I'm a believer that your profession sort of chooses you. And so I always say part of my journey was I've been a social worker since the seventh grade. And, I'm the person that people called when they were making decisions they shouldn't have, and I should have gotten them out of it. And I'm the person people talked to when they had problems. And I've been that person for a long time. And then when I finally went to college, I realized that there's a profession for that, which is super awesome. So I'm one of those really blessed people who gets to do exactly what I was put on this earth to do. So, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology education. So I went through actually getting my teaching degree. And then I realized I didn't want to teach. That whole idea of like working with lots of kids all at one time, way too overwhelming for me. And so I decided to go on and do my master's degree in social work after I worked in a school for a long time, and just sort of landed in the life of a therapist. And it's been a really great fit for me. So the specialty of working with people with trauma, abuse, and neglect is sort of an interesting specialty, right? So my job is hard, really hard. And I love every minute of it. So I always say I'm like the holder of pain. I get to be in that space with people who go through really hard times. And people have a lot of mixed messages about what trauma is. And I after doing this work for almost 20 years now, believe that if you're human and you're in a relationship with another human, you've probably been through something traumatic, because that's what life is sort of like. It might not be big T trauma like abuse and neglect and those kind of things, but you've probably had an incident or you've probably experienced something that was painful with another person. See, I could talk for hours about this, Terry. I'll be quiet. This is your show.
No, fantastic. That's really what I enjoy, is when I have guests who are so knowledgeable about their topic that, yeah, you make my job easy. So, well, when you say people have mixed messages about trauma, what are some of those mixed messages?
I think that a lot of us grew up with that whole like pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Life is hard. Move on. Not a big deal what happened. You'll get over it. Someone's always got it harder than you. Kind of those underlying messages or themes in our growing up experiences. And what happens is if we don't sort of feel what we feel in the moment or as soon after the moment as we can, we feel it later. So what I notice happening, I see a lot of women and several men who are brave enough to come into. What I always say is that when they land in my office and they sit on my couch, it's not their adult selves that we're working on. It's usually their little pieces of themselves, their younger Stacys, their middle school Terrys, their high school selves, And the reason that happens is because we all go through hard stuff throughout our lives. but we didn't necessarily have the space or someone to help us process some of that. And so I think that's why it's sort of mixed.
That makes complete sense. It it seems odd that we would be kind of working on our past selves, but yet at the same time, that also makes a whole hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and you get really activated, right? Like there's lots of emotion, it's super heated, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I just totally overreacted to that discussion. Usually it's not our adult self in that conversation. For whatever reason, that other person reminds us of somebody, triggered something in us that we experienced. And so rarely when we have lots of emotion, is it about the present moment.
Hmm. So you work a lot with women, kids, I mean,
Yeah, so
anybody?
my practice, I sort of have this spiritual connection in my practice.
Mhm.
And I say, whoever lands in my life and comes through my door is meant to be there. And so I haven't really limited myself to a specific population. I do work with kids as young as 3 and 4. I have a lot of information and training on early childhood development, how trauma impacts the brain when it's developing. So a piece of what I do is that kid piece, but that lends a lens to the adults that I work with too, right? So the oldest client I've had was 80, and she was phenomenal. She's like, I got 10 more years of my life to live. I was in a really shitty marriage for 30 of it. We need to work that out so I can live the last 10 in an awesome way. And I loved the courage in that. I'm also in the United States Army, the National Guard. So I serve this whole veteran male population as well. And I just think that we all can benefit from sort of that discussion around how do we deal with our thoughts? It's important that we have feelings and we express them appropriately. And then what is our body experience when we go through very hard things? The most common client I have though are usually women in their early 30s to late 40s. And for whatever reason, we moms, we kind of go through this life of like our kids come first, kids come first, kids come first. And then people call it midlife crisis, right? My really dear friend calls it midlife clarity. We turn this corner and we go, oh crap, I got to start dealing with myself. And I got to start figuring out what I need and who I am. And so a lot of moms will come through my door at that time.
Wow. This is an interesting theme that seems to be, I think, boy, I'm in the, right now I'm in the 20s of episodes at the moment of this recording for the Get Foxy show. And throughout those 20 some episodes, this theme of women giving and giving and giving and giving until they just flat burn out seems to be a kind of a major theme that runs through our culture. And so part of what I'm trying to achieve here with these shows is to help women realize, yes, do take time for yourself. Do engage in some self-care, because when mama's happy, everybody's happy. When mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So one of the goals of the Get Foxy show is to help get mamas happy.
I love that. Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's a whole conversation that's shifting in our culture, right? We've spent a couple decades sort of becoming these strong, independent women who don't need any help and don't need a man to do life for us and all those things. And it kind of is backfiring a little, right? Because what happens is we think we can do it all, and actually we shouldn't be doing it all. And so I think we have to shift that conversation around how do we support each other? How do we engage in relationships between men and women that are equal, but maybe we don't have equal parts or equal action that are happening in all of that? and how do we juggle and balance? And the women I see are women who are amazing moms. They're usually happily married, and they have good, strong support systems, but they're afraid to ask for help. Right? And we don't live in a culture of tribes anymore where an auntie just shows up and helps us out, or grandma's right down the street. So we have to work on sort of creating our tribes, which means vulnerability and authenticity and the ability to ask for help, which is really hard.
Yes. Yes. What are some of the most common questions that people ask you about your work?
A lot of people ask me how I got into it. And then a lot of people ask me if there's hope. And so, I often say that people land in my office when they feel hopeless, desperate, ready to kill themselves, or ready to kill their kids. And I have a no-kill policy. You can't kill them. They can't kill you. No one can kill themselves. And I think truly, like, if you're a parent, there comes a moment when you want to string your kids up by their toenails. Right? And only parents get that. If you're not a parent, you're like, this is the silliest thing. How could you feel that way about your kid? But what happens is parenting is an illusion of control. We have no control over our children. And so many of us were brought up in a culture of fear-based parenting, right? Like, you better do this, or you better do that, or kids are to be seen and not heard, and all those things. And I think a lot of us are trying to shift that a little bit, but we don't have a template for what that means. And so people always ask me, like, Stacy, how do you not kill your kid? And I'm like, time out. I have a huge, huge parenting toolbox, and there are still moments that are hard, right? Because emotions run high and emotions are big. And so I, often tell, especially parents, that part of our job is to help our kids learn how to regulate themselves. So regulate is about their ability to manage their own emotion, but they can't do that unless they've had a parent show up with them and help them learn how to do all that. And so those are a lot of the questions I get, are sort of around, like, am I screwing up my kid? If I have my own temper tantrum, how do I help my kid? How do I help myself in that moment so that I don't kill my kid? All those sort of things. And so for me, I follow Dr. Bruce Perry, and he has 3 words which I think are beautiful in parenting: regulate, relate, reason. And it sort of goes in that order. You regulate yourself, and then you regulate your kid. And regulating can take a long time, right? Sometimes our kids need a few hours to blow off steam and have an emotion. Sometimes we need that. Then we relate. And we don't really do huge doses of empathy in our culture. That's not something that media shows very often. So we need to relate and connect. And then the last step is reasoning. And that's where we ask why did you do that? But sometimes developmentally, kids aren't ready to answer those questions. So we get in these loops with our kids that actually are not about connection. And that's part of what wears us out. That was a little tangential. I'm sorry about that. Not really, but.
No, that's fantastic, Stacy. Again, here on the Get Foxy show, we are very holistic in our approach. We're talking holistic health. We're talking natural beauty. We're talking passionate living. And when I have nothing but a group of female listeners that are generally mothers who are taking care of their kids, and likely they're single mothers on top of that, this is amazing information. I mean, this is brand new information. So no, this is good stuff.
I often say, like, in our culture, it's more important that people leave the hospital with the right car seat than it is with the right parenting information. And some of the tricks that I've learned through being a therapist, especially a therapist for kids from hard places, actually applies to all of us and sort of what we need. And the other experience I've had is that the women who land in my office who are having the hardest time usually are triggered by the age of their kid, which means that they probably had their own hard time going through that age. So there's just pieces of sort of honoring, like if you're a parent of a 13-year-old and you kind of want to kill your 13-year-old all the time, then you kind of have to think about, like, what was your life, what was happening in your life when you were 13? What was that about? What was going on for you? And what are the pieces of your own experience that need to be honored, accepted, and felt in that?
Well, this is all good stuff. I mean, just even for me as a parent, hearing what you're saying, I'm already. I mean, I should be taking notes right now, but luckily I can replay this episode, so I'll be taking notes later. But this is all such good stuff for the way I interact with my own children, and how when my oldest boy was diagnosed with leukemia, how that affected his younger brother, how it affected his mother, how it affected me, and our whole family dynamic, and how we expressed ourselves. This is stuff that can heal.
Absolutely.
I mean, heal a whole family dynamic, and that's
Yeah,
big stuff.
absolutely. And so it's interesting. We kind of talk about ourselves, right? So I'm a divorced mom. I have 2 kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 10-year-old. And a week ago, I guess 2 weeks now, my daughter made a terrible choice at school, and she stole something from someone's desk and she destroyed it. And I got the email from the teacher, and then I met up with her dad for a whole nother reason later in the day, and him and I had to do some co-parenting around all of that. And all I wanted, based on all the information I know about kids, right? Like, I could totally lecture my kid. I could tell her everything she did wrong. I could make her correct it. And all I wanted to do was connect with her. And what I thought was, there has to be something going on internally for her to make such a terrible choice. So it was a crazy day, right? Like, kids are busy. She had dance after school. She had to get there. So I met her at a dance studio because she got a ride from another person. And I just told her, I'm like, you're not going to dance till you and I just hug. And she goes, Mom, didn't you hear what I did today? I go, yeah, I absolutely did. I don't even want to talk to you about it. We'll talk about it later. I just want to hug you, and I want to tell you I love you, and I just need you to know that no matter what choices you make, I'm going to love you forever and ever and ever. And she just, like, broke, right? She just sort of crushed into me, and she started crying. Her and I are crying. And then afterwards she goes, and I know I have to buy her a new one, and I need to write her an I'm sorry note, and I need to write the teacher an I'm sorry note, and you can probably email her mom and let her know that and I'm like, because she knows what she needs to do, right? I didn't need to lecture that. But the importance of connecting and seeing our kids and kind of moving our ability to, like, make sure they know the difference between right and wrong, kind of setting that aside in that moment. Sometimes that's super hard, but that's the important stuff. Like, that's what keeps kids safe. That's what helps them grow into being wonderful children and great adults. And they're vulnerable. Kids make stupid choices. They steal stuff. They wreck stuff, right? That happens. And I did email the mom and I said, hey, we're dealing with our kid. Just help us love her through it. She'll repair it. Just give us a couple weeks to figure it out. The mom's like, oh, yeah, we're going to do this girl drama for the next 10 years. Let's just keep the lines of communication open. And I appreciated the adult response to that, too. Because that's the other piece of all that. She could have been a really crappy mom that was like, no, you're a bad parent. This is all on you. But she's like, nope, we're going to walk through this. Thanks for letting me know. And I appreciated that.
Out of the many people that you've served, can you tell us about one of your patients, or I guess maybe clients, depending on your terminology? For me, as an acupuncturist, they're patients. Other people are clients. Um, what's been the most outstanding transformation you've seen in your practice?
Mm. I think I have two answers to that. One, I have worked with a lot of parents in helping them understand the developmental age of their kids. So a kiddo might land in my life who is chronologically 10, 11, 12, but developmentally infant, toddler. And that's super hard to close that gap. But because of in utero trauma, because of early childhood experiences, because of whatever their story is, they didn't get to achieve some of the developmental tasks that needed to be achieved initially. So helping educate parents about meeting that developmental need and then working with them to really meet that need of their kid so that they can get through that developmental stage has been awesome, because we can't skip development. We go through it, and we can either be a 10-year-old throwing a 2-year-old temper tantrum or a 40-year-old throwing a 2-year-old temper tantrum. And it's a lot easier to close the gap a lot younger. So, and when we stress, we regress. Like, I've thrown 2-year-old temper tantrums in an adult body, right? So helping parents really see their developmental age of their kids and helping them understand that behavior is a symptom of roots that are much younger is like, that's a gift on my side of that. I've been doing this work now long enough that I have many clients who've grown from kids into adulthood. And, you know, one of my hardest clients is on her way to college right now. And when I met them, we didn't even know if she'd live the next day. So that's phenomenal. And then I love when especially moms walk through my door and invest in themselves and give themselves the gift of like a 90-minute session for 6 to 8 sessions and do the hard work of just honoring who they are and the experiences they've had, because it's hard work. It's really hard work, but they leave and they feel a little more refreshed and they feel a little more healed and they show up in a more present way in their life. And so I have multiple moms who come to me because they have issues with their kids. I've never even met their kids. I just do the work with the moms, and they honor those pieces that are super hard. And to me, that's such a gift, to like, just a privilege to walk that journey with those women. I also have a couple men who have walked through and been brave enough to say, this is what's happened to me. This is what's going on. And they've done that hard work too. And they leave the same way. I think everybody should do this. Yes. Everybody should gift themselves a therapist. You know, life is rough. It's nice to have your own ally. So those are probably my two. I mean, those are a little bit more generalized statements, but the gift of someone coming in, doing their work, and feeling different when they leave, that's pretty awesome.
I would agree with you there. I get to witness something like that with my work. When somebody comes in feeling one way, they receive the acupuncture, they leave feeling completely different. And that's a beautiful, beautiful feeling.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to switch it up on you a little bit here. And I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all my guests. And that is, what does being foxy mean to you, Stacy?
Oh, I love that. So this is a super fun question for me because now I'm a single woman, Carrie. So Foxy is really about confidence and feeling secure in who you are in your own skin. And I think there's layers to that. I think we all have different domains, right? Like Foxy is feeling good about what I do for a living. Foxy is feeling good about where I'm at in my sexual self. So many women forget the sexual parts of their life, and that's just a bummer. Confidence in who I am, in my personality, how I feel in my body, right? I don't think at our age, I don't think we have perfect bodies, especially we moms. There's a million things we'd want to change about it, but I feel good about who I am. And to me, that's Foxy, right? I love that, looking at someone and noticing that they're self-confident and assured and they're just happy with who they are in their own skin.
Has there ever been a lie or has there ever been a time in your life? There we go. Now I've said the sentence. Has there ever been a time in your life where you couldn't find that foxiness, and what did you do to reclaim it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say being pregnant was absolutely, I was not one of those happy people when I was pregnant. I couldn't wait for that to end. So the reclaiming of it was knowing there was an ending in sight. Um, going through my divorce, certainly that there were moments in time where not feeling foxy. I also think when I eat terribly and I don't take care of myself, it's a little more hard. It's harder to capture that. So, foxy is a fluid concept.
Yes, it is. And that's why I asked the question, because I get so many different answers. And that's the fun part about it.
Absolutely. It's a great question.
So then what specifically did you do to reclaim that foxiness?
So I have a couple tools in my toolbox that have been super important. One, I have a really healthy support system. So I have people who will continue to pick up the phone when I call and lean on them, even if I'm a hot mess. And I think that's crucial to my well-being. I'm a huge texter. In this day and age, most of my people, most of my tribe don't live in the same city I live in. So even just connecting via text every day or every other day, just saying, love you, have a good day, that reminds me that I'm not just the person in this moment. And I go to therapy. Good therapists go to therapy. I invest in myself, and I'm always doing that work. And I have an excellent support team in that. I think it's important we connect with people who remind us that we are foxy. Although none of my friends have ever said that, so I'm gonna have to start.
What?
I know.
Well, I'm saying it right now.
Love you, buddy.
You, Stacy, are foxy.
Thank you, Terry.
So what is the one piece of advice that you would have for the Vulpanistas, the followers of all things Foxy that listen to the Get Foxy show?
So I love that question. So my word of the year is moments. And I think my piece of advice for all your listeners is that life is just a moment in time. And we have lots of moments throughout the days, just like we have lots of really intense feelings. Waves, feelings are like waves. They wash over us and then they go away. And I think every single one of us can get through the next moment. And I think we have to hold on to that.
This has been a beautiful moment chatting with you, Stacy. We're starting to bump up on time here, but how can people get a hold of you if they want more information about where you're speaking or what you're teaching or how to schedule a session with you? How can they get a hold of you?
So definitely visit my website. So my current website is bewhatsright.com, bewhatsright.com. I'm getting ready to launch a new website, gobeyu.org. It's live. It's not great yet, but the whole purpose of GoBeYou is really around people sinking into who they are. And it's going to have a lot of classes very similar to the information that we talked about. It's all virtual stuff. Kind of what I've learned as a therapist that would be helpful for parenting shortcuts, right? And different things that are universal for people, everyone needs to know. So website, my email address, Stacy, Stacy at bewhatsright.com. Thank you for having me on, Terry.
Thank you for taking the time to be here. I so appreciate you and honor you, and you are being what's right. And again, my friend, you are Foxy.
I love you, buddy. I'm so glad I got to be in your space for this time together. Thank you.